I don't mind being called set-piece FC. Doesn't bother me, because when you get corners, the other team starts having a panic up.
Sometimes if you're going to win titles, you have to win ugly. And that was an ugly win.
Our players were playing with a bit of stress. It looked like they were a little bit inhibited. You have to get through them and you win them, and it doesn't matter that you haven't played well. The whole thing at this stage season is winning the game, chalking it off and moving on.
And then there is that moment at the end when the whistle goes where there is elation and you realise actually the 3 points there and it's going to be okay for another couple of days. Maybe that's just part of the experience.
Definitely the overriding emotion from Arsenal fans I was speaking to after full time was much like Perry. It was relief more than joy.
Winning like this can give you more belief than winning when you've blitzed the team like 3 or 4-0, because then you start to think, yeah, when it does get a little bit sticky, we can get ourselves through it. So I think they'll get more belief out of this than if they'd have beat Chelsea 3 or 4-0.
I don't think they're going to drop many points, City, between now and the rest of the season. So Arsenal have got to be right at it, right to the end.
But this is going to go right down to the last 2 games, game of the season, without any shadow of a doubt.
Spooky, 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 spooky. Arsenal's win over Chelsea on Sunday meant that all 4 matches in the Premier League ended with a remarkable 2-1 scoreline. It's the only day in English top-flight history with 4 or more games to see every match finish with the same scoreline. Now, Alex Crook is with us today, and he likes to bill himself as the country's top tipster. You'll often hear him say these words, I told you. But the odds here, Crook, would have been 4,600 to 1. When you talk about your best bets, mate, that's the kind of tips that we need, brother.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be a very rich man if I could tip as well as that. But yeah, that is quite incredible. Not so much the 4 home wins, but you say the identical scorelines probably never will happen again in our lifetime, I wouldn't have thought.
Perry Groves is here. We only invited him back because he bites more often than Luis Suarez.
Where's the Jaws theme tune?
Happy Monday, boys. I am Sean Ryder. It is Happy Monday, officially.
It is. You're in a good mood. Obviously, yesterday at half-time when things were locked level, we thought this was going to be one of those podcasts where Perry loses his halfway through. But of course, at the end of it, you were crowing, which I listen. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. Good luck to Arsenal. That's what I say. Right. Okay. We'll get onto the title race very shortly. Listen, this podcast is going to be a little bit different to usual because although we review the weekend's action, we're also going to look ahead to what is an absolute smorgasbord of midweek stuff as well. Do you mind if I just get something off my chest first of all? Is that okay, Peg?
So what's the counselling session, is it?
I think I need to do that.
You're not going to risk your membership in the PGMOL and your FA Sam title again, are you?
Oh, he comes off his Bob Willis long run, is it? Long run.
Well, listen, we love football, boys. We love football. We absolutely adore it. The passion, the feeling, the controversy. We want to talk about football. Now, this weekend, we've had some wonderful football matches, right? Okay. Some ridiculous defending. Jordan Pickford made one of the saves of the season. We had a 5-2 match. Could have been anything. In that match between Liverpool and West Ham, we saw some of the worst set-piece marking in Premier League history. We had a series of goalkeepers making huge mistakes. The bottom side humbling a team towards the top of the division. We all watched in earnest to see if Manchester City could get past Leeds United. But at the end of the weekend, we spent most of Sunday morning and Saturday night talking about terrible decisions, incredibly extensive VAR delays that were totally unnecessary, and VAR's re-refereeing matches, and referees letting them re-referee matches, or even in some cases, relying on them to re-referee matches. Now, they tell me that the IFAB are meeting this weekend, and they were so desperate to stop time wasting that they're going to time limit throw-ins to 5 seconds. Yeah, because that's the problem. What about the 4-minute, 38-second delay to work out whether or not Ashley Barnes handballed it, or the minute scrutiny of the Evan-Nilsson goal, which you could see after one replay, or the fact that me, Perry and Crook both told Chris Kavanagh that he'd have to send off Maxence Lacroix and give a penalty within one replay of the incident at Old Trafford. and yet he had to wait ages to get confirmation from his mate at Stockley Park. The fact is, if you need to look at it for longer than the average tenure of a Watford manager, it's not clear and it's not obvious. Go back to your core principles. Light touch, fellas. Light touch. Clear and obvious. Right now, you are interfering with play. That's it. The sermon is over, Perry. It's over.
Minimum interference, maximum effect. That was maximum interference for minimum. I mean, no, seriously, it was, because if you look at it, and when you look at it, and I know we don't get all of the angles, do you, when you sit on Match of the Day? Every angle that they showed you, you couldn't say 100% certain that hit Barnes's arm. It looked to me like he's side and then he's thigh and then down. So they're trying to. Portini worries me because he's one of these referees who's the VAR that tries to see something that you haven't seen. Look what I'm being quite clever. We don't need to be clever. We just don't. Or you just want you to have the good of football in your brain and in your stomach. That is basically it. So that goal should have been awarded, 100%.
Yeah, I agree. And Crookmeister's still annoyed with Chris Kavanagh for taking too long to give that penalty, aren't you, Crook?
Well, it just shows how reliant the referees have become on technology. They're petrified of making their own decision. They know they've got a safety net. He had a brilliant view of the incident, and any referee worth their salt should know straight away it's a penalty, because despite the fact I'm getting a bit of stick from Palace fans, the challenge continues in the box. It's denial of a goal scoring opportunity. It's a red card. That's one of those incidents where VAR should not have to intervene at all. But the simple fact of the matter is, too many of our officials now are not refereeing the game on the pitch. They're happy for their pal sat hundreds of miles away to make the big calls.
Okay, forget that now, because we're not going to talk about it anymore. The rest of the podcast is only about football. So let's get stuck into the weekend's action and look forward to what is going to be a brilliant midweek as well. We'll start with the league leaders, and it wasn't so easy for them at the Emirates on Sunday. Arsenal 2, Chelsea 1. Arsenal managed to extend their lead at the top of the table again. They overcame 10-man Chelsea. Perry Groves, did you enjoy watching that match, or are you mentally exhausted?
No, you can't. Honestly, you can't enjoy those days. And I said that I wanted us to play with the same intent as what we did when we played Spurs at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Weirdly, there was less pressure there because you're away from home. There's more pressure at home. You two guys obviously were at the Emirates, and when I was watching it, it looked like Arsenal, our players, were playing with a bit of stress. It looked like they were a little bit inhibited, which you can understand because this is a massive game. We're not playing a team. It's difficult to play teams middle and bottom of the Premier League anyway. This is a Chelsea team that have been in good form, although they had like 2 draws recently, but they're very well structured under Liam Rosenior. You know, they actually came to Emirates. They were on the front foot. They came to try and win the game where their tactics were different to the Carabao Cup semi-final, where they played 5 at the back. And you could tell that the Arsenal players were just feeling a little bit. But what you have to do, boys, what Man City did, we'll talk about later, is in those games, which are very, very nervy and it's bitty and it's like it's endurance in the end, and you have to get through them and you win them. And it doesn't matter that you haven't played well. The whole thing at this stage season is winning the game, chalking it off and moving on. And the big weapon that we have in our Arsenal, see what I did there, is if you're not playing well, then I don't mind being called set piece FC. Doesn't bother me, because that affects the team you're playing against. Because when you get corners, the other team starts having a panic up, and you were at the stadium. That's exactly what Chelsea did. They were having a panic up every time we got a corner.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because actually Arsenal had a bit of a panic up every time Chelsea got a corner as well, especially in that first half. And obviously Chelsea's goal came from a corner. It was a brilliant delivery by Reece James, headed in by Nkapie. I felt Chelsea let Arsenal off the hook a little bit with their indiscipline, but we'll get to Chelsea in just a second. Let's concentrate on Arsenal for a bit. I wonder whether or not, Crook, actually this is part of the experience that you have to go through if you're an Arsenal fan, going through this final step of the journey on the march to the title. You have to be nervous. You have to watch every game through your fingers. You have to experience the absolute trepidation that it's all going to come crashing down every single week. And then there is that moment at the end when the whistle goes where there is elation and you realise actually the 3 points are there and it's going to be okay for another couple of days. Maybe that's just part of the experience.
Yeah, I actually didn't think the atmosphere was as nervy as it has been during some of our recent trips to the Emirates. I thought it got more nervy actually when they were leading 2-0 against Brighton and Brighton scored, and then you could hear a pin drop. I thought the Arsenal fans largely stayed with their team yesterday, and it was interesting. You mentioned, didn't you? You went out for a toilet break during one of our adverts and spotted signs in the second half on the TV screens in the concourses saying these are not going to be showing the game in the second half. We need your support. Basically, don't stand in the concourse, get out there and cheer on the team. So I thought the atmosphere was positive, but definitely the overriding emotion from Arsenal fans I was speaking to after full time was much like Perry. It was relief more than joy. And sometimes, I wrote this in my comment piece for talkSPORT.com, sometimes if you're going to win titles, you have to win ugly. And that was an ugly win. And it was a massive moment at the end when David Raya made that save from Garnacho. Otherwise, Chelsea, who actually I thought were the better team with 10 men, would have snatched a point.
Yeah, is it slightly worrying that there were still opportunities for Chelsea to win it even when they were down to 10 players?
Yeah, because as Arteta said himself, you have to manage the game a little better. You have to keep the ball. That's why I thought he put Norgard on, to be fair, because Declan Rice just looked like, unusually for him, he was just running on a little bit of sort of empty. So I got that, putting him in there to try and calm everything down. That's the perfect situation. We're missing Mourinho, because Mourinho, when that happens, he used to put him on and he'd keep the ball for 10, 15 seconds, do a pirouette in midfield, and it calms everybody down. But the concourse thing you said, that's all from Arteta. You know, when it's all Arteta. He's told the stadium managers, turn your TV screens off. We want everybody back in the seat. And I wasn't there, but I thought the players looked a bit nervy. But it's pleasing to know that the Arsenal fans, because they've got a big part to play for the rest of the season at home, because they keep positive, then by osmosis goes into players on the pitch. They get anxious. If you've got 57,000 Arsenal fans getting anxious, I don't care what any player says, it affects you, because you do get a little bit more tense. So winning ugly, and you mentioned their belief, Crookie. Winning like this can give you more belief than winning when you've blitzed the team like 3 or 4-0, because then you start to think, when it does get a little bit sticky, we can get ourselves through it. Crookie, you've seen Man United win titles. Sam, you've seen Chelsea win titles. Not every game throughout that whole season has been brilliant free-flowing football. It's like,
of course not.
No, it's going to be a bit sticky. The football under Mourinho and Antonio Conte wasn't easy on the eye a lot of the time, but you had big players like Drogba, Frank Lampard would get you out of trouble. That's what happened with Arsenal yesterday from the set pieces. So I think they'll get more belief out of this than if they'd have beat Chelsea 3 or 4-0.
There's quite a focus on those set pieces, isn't there? And the fact that they're being called set piece FC is almost like a stick to beat them with. I mean, is that fair? And do we really care about the fact that they score a lot of goals from set pieces? It's a general trend in the Premier League, actually, at the moment. And I think probably overall we're a little bit sort of like set pieced out after sort of 8 months of the season. Will it take the shine off Arsenal's title if they win it with 30%, 40% of their goals, or an above average number of goals from set pieces, Crook?
Well, listen, I don't think Arsenal fans will complain if they win their first title for more than 2 decades playing this way. But again, I did write in that comment piece, this is more George Graham than it is Arsene Wenger. It isn't free-flowing, exciting football.
But does that really matter? Does it matter
not to Arsenal fans? Not to Arsenal fans. I think their detractors might use it as a stick to beat them with. And I think you're right. It's actually, I think it's a general issue with the Premier League, not just with Arsenal. We saw it with that game at Everton on Monday night, ruined as a spectacle in the second half. It was like watching rugby union at times, and it was the same yesterday because it wasn't just Arsenal, it was Chelsea with their set pieces as well. I'm a purist. I would prefer to see more goals from open play, but as I say, Arsenal fans won't care if they win the title.
Are you really? Is he really a purist? Is he a purist? He's sort of 80s, 90s football guy. He's not really a purist, is he? He's not sort of like mid 2010s Spain tiki taka, is he? I mean, he's more sort of like up and at them in your face, get the ball out wide, stick it into the big man.
I think he's more surrealist than like a purist, to be fair. But the thing is, I know like we've had like a bit of a swing where all of a sudden Arsenal score a lot of goals from like corners. Other teams, I'll go, oh, yes, that's quite a good idea. And I think for the fans in the stadium, I think they get fed up of short corners and you go short and you come back out again and you try and change over. I think it heightens excitement because we got the resurgence of the long throw where balls into box. How many times we say we want balls into the box so that there's skirmishes, there's mayhem, and full well now that 90% of the teams are going to put decent deliveries in, whether it's near post one like Reece James did for in cap his own goal, or we like to do the far post one, you overload and you make it like a sort of a line out. I think it creates excitement in the stadium.
I think it does, and I think there's certain times when that is the case. But I also think there's times, like Crook has already identified, where it becomes such a pain in the backside that there's too much jostling, there's too much wrestling inside the penalty area, and no one can really work out who's committing a foul, who's not committing a foul, whether it should be legal, whether it shouldn't be. What you have to have is a really good goalkeeper, and David Raya is one of those, and Sonny Lomans is one of those. And Robert Sanchez is not one of those. And the fact that Arsenal scored their clinching goal from him basically complaining that he was fouled by Casper the Friendly Ghost is remarkable, really. I mean, the fact that he had the audacity to turn around and suggest for one moment that he was fouled is ridiculous. But Timber obviously had to score it. He did, and Arsenal go on. Look, we'll talk a little bit more about Chelsea in just a second, but Arsenal are fighting on four fronts as a result of this victory and their continued good form. Perry, it feels as though the Premier League is the one that matters, but they are still on course for all four trophies.
They are, and obviously the Premier League and the Champions League, as an Arsenal fan, are the priorities. I think, obviously, in the FA Cup, we play Mansfield at the weekend. That'll be a team where it will be the squad players that haven't had minutes will obviously get their run out, like they did against Portsmouth. But the good thing about it is, even when Arteta makes changes or he puts a changed team, with squad players, there's no drop-off. In the squad, there's no drop-off in the standard of players. We looked yesterday, which is a massive bonus, is Kai Havertz coming on. And he did a couple of things yesterday where the ball came into him and he chested it down and he kept possession, which calms everybody down. So, but all Arsenal can do is, obviously, the neutrals in the media will look forward and look at the games that are coming up. You just have to keep it in the game. It's just, as I said, it's ticking off games. So the next big FA Cup final, in inverted commas, is against Brighton on Wednesday. That's as far as you can look forward. As a player,
is that what you do? You've won titles. You know what it's like to be in a title-winning dressing room.
Yeah.
What do you do? Do you do that? Do you just tick off the next game? Do you not look ahead at all? You don't think about that game between Manchester City and Arsenal away from home on April the 18th. You just think about the next one. Is that what happens?
Yeah, I couldn't tell. Obviously, the Arsenal players now know obviously the date of the Carabao Cup final. It's obvious, but when we was playing, I couldn't tell you if we were training on the Wednesday. If we had a game midweek the following week, I couldn't tell you who we played because the players just focused on that game on the Saturday. There's one player that used to know where we were playing and when we were playing.
Paul Merson.
Paul Merson. Exactly. I used to call him Rain Man because he knew every fixture. But latterly in his career, he was waiting to see if he'd get a little breakaway somewhere. So that's where he'd know if his team got knocked out of the FA Cup. We think actually I can fly off to Barbados. So yeah, but players will not be looking no further than a week in the future. No chance.
Yeah, and listen, when Paul was down at Portsmouth, we used to sit in the dressing room because he used to get there really early on a Thursday because he only used to train Thursdays and Fridays. The rest of the week he was spent in the Midlands. He used to come down on a Thursday morning and he would get there really early, have a cup of tea. We'd sit in the dressing room and he'd get the fixture book out and he would plot. He would work out what Portsmouth needed to get to the promotion places. He would sit there with a big chart. He had everything. He knew exactly, we'll get these points, they'll get that points, blah, 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 and we'll end up sealing it then. That's what it was like. And he was obviously like that when he was at Arsenal as well. Yeah, Brighton, Everton, Bournemouth, and then Manchester City, the next four fixtures in the Premier League for Arsenal. Forest, West Ham, Chelsea, and Arsenal are the next four fixtures for Manchester City. Shall we talk a little bit of Chelsea? They have a goalkeeper that will always let them down, no matter how good his shot stopping is. That's his job, by the way. He should be good at that bit. But every now and again, he puts in a performance. Arsenal in the Cup, yesterday's game at the Emirates, where you know from the minute the game starts, he's going to cost the team dear. They have a squad that seem to have picked up more cards than a croupier. 9 red cards this season, over 100 yellow cards over the course of 2 seasons. Chelsea are going to miss out on the Champions League, and they're going to miss out because ill discipline would have cost them dear. And Liam Rosenior said to you afterwards, that is something we need to look into. We've got to get to the bottom of it because there's something deep lying. So what is it?
Yeah, do you know what? I was pleased because his reaction after the second goal was to berate the fourth official. So he obviously fell for it that his goalkeeper had been fouled. Pedro Neto fell for it, which is why he talked his way to a yellow card and then went into a ridiculous challenge with Martinelli to get himself sent off. So I do think you're right. Robert Sanchez has an awful lot to answer for. What was it, 2 minutes on the clock when he basically gave it to Victor Gyökeres on the edge of the penalty area and nearly conceded a goal. I have a little bit of sympathy because I think he's being asked to do something that he's not capable of. You know, he's not a goalkeeper who's any good with his feet. So therefore, why would you ask him to play out from the back, particularly away from home against the league leaders?
That's a prerequisite of being a goalkeeper in 2026, I'm afraid.
Well, they need a new goalkeeper then. And if you remember, every transfer window, we get the briefings that they're happy with their roster of goalkeepers. They don't need a new number one. You do, because you're not going to be challenging for Premier Leagues and Champions Leagues with this fella in goal with the greatest respect in the world. But in terms of the discipline, there is no excuse for it. And actually, not just a red card. I mean, that's out of character for Pedro Neto to go flying into a tackle like that. But Enzo Fernandez got himself a stupid booking minutes later for sort of hurling the ball away in frustration. So it is something they need to clamp down on. But it's a fundamental flaw with their business model. They've got too many young players, therefore they make rushes of judgment, they make naive decisions, and they lack those experienced heads in the dressing room to nurture these young players through emotional London derbies like on Sunday. But it's not going to change anytime soon. As Margaret Thatcher once said, the lady isn't for turning. They're going to keep signing young players, and that is going to undermine their bid to get back to where they belong. What I find fascinating is that you're a Chelsea fan, Sam, who doesn't agree with the model. You're happy to point out the flaws of it. There are some Chelsea fans I was speaking to last night who are perfectly happy. You know, they're excited to see what the future holds. They tell me that finishing sixth would be an achievement this year. How the mighty have fallen.
Chelsea aren't going to win anything, because if the business module of making money comes before football decisions, sensible football decisions, you're not going to win anything, because it's not just in games. You know, where obviously they lost it. By the way, Robert Sanchez, he's 6'6". He looked like Jimmy Cranky when the ball came in for the cross from the corner.
It was embarrassing.
Yeah, but even in games where they lost their head there, this is all about the management, as you said there, Crookie, of the dressing room on the day-to-day basis of players coming into training, how they conduct themselves, what they're doing. That's where you need the senior players to tell the younger players to calm themselves down. And the worrying thing is, Pedro Neto is a senior player, and he's the one that has lost it. And he's the one, if you're making football decisions, and if he was thinking rationally, which you've got to try and do in any game, let alone big London derbies, is he just trucks the run of Martinelli. You just follow him down the touchline. You just keep going. And worst ways out, you might ease him off with your shoulder. You know, when you just try to knock someone off balance. The challenge that he made was unprofessional. It was completely irrational. And he let his team, even though Chelsea were the better side with 10 men for the last 10 minutes, if they'd have had 11 on and he was still on, he was one of the main threats on the right-hand side every time he got the ball. So he basically cost Chelsea, Sanchez and him cost Chelsea the game.
Yep. Chelsea face off with Aston Villa in midweek. That looks massively important, especially with both teams losing momentum, Crook.
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it? I mean, it's huge for Manchester United and Liverpool. That they'd probably take a draw. I think those two top five rivals. But it was always going to be a big week for Chelsea. Not just the two league games, but obviously Wrexham in the FA Cup on Saturday, when the whole world, I think, is hoping for an upset, unless you're a Chelsea fan. So we'll see what they're made of now. We'll see what they're made. We'll see what they're made of now.
You keep mentioning that Wrexham game as well. It's almost feel like you fancy a little upset.
I do.
You want a little upset.
I'll put my hand up. I fancy an upset there, real, to be fair. I've seen Wrexham.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course you do. You know what Wrexham upsetting a big team is all about, don't you?
There's no need for that. I was there 2 weeks ago, and I've got rid of that. It was like going to see a counsellor. You know, when you write down your problems on a bit of paper and then you put them in the fire and they burn them from away. That was me going back to the racecourse.
I saw Mickey Thomas the other week. What a legend. What an absolute legend. He'll be all over the place this weekend, won't he? Their former Chelsea and Wrexham star.
Do you know he was still electronically tagged when he came out and scored that free kick? He'd just been in prison. So he did well to run.
For those who don't know, Perry was in an Arsenal team that got knocked out by Wrexham. It was a massive upset at the racecourse ground. What year was it?
1992.
1992.
In
Oh,
that
right,
bruised
okay.
banana, yellow and black strip,
That
wasn't
is
it?
it.
If
That's
memory
the
serves me right.
PTSD. Yeah, 100% quickly. That's why Arsenal fans weren't having it at the start.
Why have Chelsea and Aston Villa both gone off the boil? Because is it down to depth of squad, or is it other teams getting wise to their tactics, Crook? Because Villa, for example, now everyone's realised you just don't fall into their traps.
Well, Chelsea's game management. They should have beaten Burnley. They should have beaten Leeds. They had a loss of head for 5 or 6 minutes against Leeds that cost them the game. They lost a player against Burnley and ultimately conceded. And even against Arsenal, had they not have gone down to 10 men, I think they were more than capable of getting a draw out of it. So I'd be more worried if I was a Villa fan than a Chelsea fan, probably, because the goals have dried up. Is it 5 in 8 now, I think, for Aston Villa? Ollie Watkins has had a disappointing season overall, actually, which is a concern when it comes to the World Cup in England. But we said it at the start of the season, you can't keep smashing in 25-yard screamers. You can't keep outperforming your XG like Villa were. So I'm not surprised they've fallen away. Injuries have played a massive part. You know, their midfield has been decimated. And I did say, and I got shot down about it, when they made the signings they did in the window. I know you're a big Tammy Abraham fan. He's come from Turkey. Douglas Luiz, Nottingham Forest didn't want him. Juventus didn't want him. I wasn't inspired by what they did this transfer window compared to a year ago.
Yeah, okay. A year ago, they signed Asensio and Rashford. I mean, it's slightly different. But Tammy Abraham, he'll be fine. Trust me. Trust Tammy. Trust in Tammy. He'll be okay. Let's move on to Manchester United because they beat Crystal Palace, mainly through sheer force of will on Sunday afternoon, Perry. Win this week and watch the other rivals drop points in the Champions League. Then this is the sort of almost certain that they'll get into the top 5 this year and get that Champions League place that they crave. But trips to Newcastle are never easy, even if Newcastle have lost their last 3 in the Premier League at home. So what happens here?
I'd fancy Man United. I know Crookie, obviously, he's got Man United in his veins, and as a neutral, you look at it a lot more sort of objectively. I actually think with Manchester United, that was Michael Carrick's biggest test on Sunday, because they're 1-0 down at half time. They showed a little clip of him, didn't he, running up the touchline, didn't they? Think, right, I've got to get in the dressing room early because I know how I'm going to go about this, what I'm going to say. And I think when he said that he didn't make any changes, he just thought that there was no tempo in their play, that they weren't moving the ball quick enough, they weren't closing down, a little bit too passive. He said a little couple of tactical tweaks, and then the players are invested in him anyway. As soon as that happens at half time, and he gets his message across, and they think actually he knows exactly what he's saying here, and he's seen something that we haven't seen, and then they go out, and then obviously again you want big players to stand up. And I've been critical of Bruno Fernandes in the big games. I think sometimes he goes missing and he can be a bit petulant, but he was absolutely outstanding in that second half. Whereas the captain goes, I'm going to affect this. The ball that he put through for Cunha when Lacroix got sent off was out of this world, because no one else sees that on the pitch when the ball's rolled to him and he puts it through sort of first time. So from Man United's point of view, I think you'd fancy them strong because you can play teams at the right time. And Newcastle look like they're struggling with a bit of energy. Eddie Howe's making strange decisions and where he's playing players. We said about what Marty playing, sort of in the 10, he's playing Joe Linton on the forward side, on the left-hand side, to the midfield. So I think it's a good time to play him. But Michael Carrick, I think he's got 23 points, hasn't he, out of his first games in
He's
charge?
not doing too badly, is he?
Yeah, Man United. I didn't realise my old manager, Mike Walker, goalkeeper Mike Walker, was on that. Everton fans were like, really? We didn't think he got 23 points, let alone in his first like 9-10 games.
He had a good start. It went downhill pretty much after that, though. So someone who didn't have a great start but is having a very good sort of run at the moment is Benjamin Šeško. 4 goals in 4 games, 6 in 7. Look, Bruno did change the game. That pass, the delivery for the Šeško goal, absolutely superb. But it was a brilliant header as well by Benjamin Šeško. And I keep telling Crook this, from what I've heard at the training ground, Michael Carrick is a massive fan of Benjamin Šeško. He thinks he's got something special with this kid. He's only 22 years of age. He thinks that he'll develop into a very good player, and it looks like a very good purchase from Manchester United. let's see though how he works the formation, the team selection against Newcastle, because at the moment he's almost got too many good players in one area of the field, Crook.
Yeah, and the beauty of it has been really, apart from West Ham, we've not had any midweek football to worry about. Listen, I'd love to be playing in the Champions League, but as a United fan, it's quite nice that you can win on a Sunday and then not have to worry about it for another week by and large. But obviously, we got this midweek game. He is pretty much reliant on a core of 12 or 13 players in terms of quality, because otherwise you're making changes that weaken the team. So it is a challenge, and it was a challenge they didn't really pass last time out with that West Ham game. They looked a bit jaded. They were lucky to get a point for another Šeško goal at the end. So that's why I actually think a draw away from home at Newcastle, where United haven't travelled well of late, and there's always that rivalry between the two going back to the Kevin Keegan era, wouldn't be a terrible result. I'd love Perry to be right and take all three. But just to reiterate what's been said on Bruno Fernandes, there's a lot of nonsense that follows Bruno Fernandes around, because he's a bit theatrical, because maybe he's not a sort of old school captain. He's far and away Manchester United's best player since Sir Alex Ferguson retired. And now that he's got quality players around him, you're starting to see that week in, week out in terms of the numbers he's putting on the board. There's still a debate, I think, at board level about whether they cash in this summer. Please don't do that. Give him the opportunity. Sign another couple of midfielders to bolster that area of the pitch, maybe a defender. And do you know what? If they keep Bruno Fernandes and they add to the squad, maybe a title tilt next season is not.
All right, Crookie, calm down. Was you out
no, I'm not going to calm down. Look at the form. If we had a proper manager for the first half of the season instead of the Portuguese fella, you'd be talking about United as potential title contenders.
Crook's not factoring in the fact that actually next season they'll be playing Champions League football as well, and they'll actually stay in the cup for a little bit longer than a trip to Grimsby away. So
but they can't sell Bruno, is my point. You must agree with that.
You're absolutely right. They should never, ever even consider selling Bruno. Keep Bruno until the end of his career. He should be part of that Manchester United renaissance, and he should be a central core of it for the next couple of years. Why? How much do you think it would cost you to replace a player of the quality of Bruno Fernandes? You haven't got the money to be able to do that, right? So forget that. Keep hold of him and invest in the areas where you can add quality around him. You need numbers for a start. That's the first thing you need. Along with some tactical improvements, I think an ability to alter matches has been really key for Michael Carrick. He's also instilled this thing that is really important: fight. And they are coming good in second halves. And I did send Crook a text on Monday in our group saying, when they were all worrying about the fact that it was 0-0 at halftime or whatever, I said, they score goals in the second half. All of their goals they score are in the second half. Don't panic. And actually, it's happened again this weekend as well. They are very, very Manchester United, this team. Right, let's move on, because we've got to talk about terrible Tottenham. Fulham 2, Tottenham 1. The relegation fears cannot be ignored any longer. Spurs could very well be on the way down. Tottenham, terrible. The scoreline looks tight, but actually, Perry, Fulham should have finished it off way before it got nervy towards the end.
Yeah, very much so. You've got a team in Fulham who are very well structured, very well set up. They've got a good spirit there. There's no massive egos. They've got players like Harry Wilson, who's probably playing the best football of his career. It'd be interesting to see what they do with him, because obviously his contract's up at the end of the season. The thing that completely summed Spurs up in the whole game was Iwobi's goal, because we was watching it together. When it comes from to Iwobi on the right-hand side, no Spurs player goes and closes him down with intent. He's got loads of time. Harry Wilson just jogs into the 10 position inside right of the box. Iwobi rolls it into him. Wilson has probably 6-7 yards of space, and no one goes to engage him. So then he can just lay it off and put it into Iwobi's path. Iwobi he's got time, because apparently he's got these elasticated groins that he can got at different angles, or he's got a different technique with his inside of his right right foot side.
Amazing.
Where he gets power on it as well. And it was a brilliantly crafted goal from Fulham, right? You're looking at it from Spurs, you're thinking, you're not playing like a team that you think that is in relegation trouble, and you're fighting for your lives, and you're putting your bodies on the line. So I said was it 3 or 4 weeks ago, Sam, that I thought that Spurs were in a relegation battle. I didn't think they'd tail off this badly and perform this badly. And for Igor Tudor, I know it's difficult from going in. He's got to try and implement his personality, but he's making really Conor Gallagher. You're a big fan of Conor Gallagher, right? When I was looking at that game, he was playing on the right of a midfield four. He's completely out of position. Archie Gray is playing left back, out of position. He changes from a 3 to a 4.
Well, part of that, Perry, is the fact that they've got so many players out, and they, almost got a first team out at the moment, which is really hampering them in terms of who they can select. It means that they've got to play people out of position. There is nobody else to play left back. But you're absolutely right. It doesn't make it any easier for those players. I think most people, and I know what you mean, because I was one of those who said, I was talking to Stuart Pearce about it probably 6 weeks ago, and I said they won't go down, this Tottenham team, but they will be deep in it and probably survive because the others are so bad down there and won't get the points that are necessary. But, Crook, it's becoming a little bit more and more possible every single week that they could actually go down. What on earth have they done at that football club?
Yeah, well, especially with this game against Palace, because if you look at Palace's performance before the red card, they played very well. And obviously they got a big win in Europe last week to get into the round of 16. It looks like the players have made peace with Oliver Glasner's meltdowns and are focused now on the rest of the season. So I wouldn't be surprised if Palace go there and win. I really wouldn't. And then it will depend on what happens the previous night. Forest are going to lose at Man City. Not sure Fulham against West Ham is a foregone conclusion. And that piles the pressure on Tottenham if West Ham get a positive result there. The issue they've got, it's only 2 games in, they've made a dreadful appointment because they've got a firefighter who has got no experience of English football. They've brought him in because they think he can sort of shock the players into action. He sounds like Ralph Rangnick. He's chucking everybody under the bus. He's obviously not happy with the dressing room that he's walked into. They're not going to listen. They didn't want to listen to Thomas Frank, who had a long-term contract and was sort of softly. Why are they going to listen to this sort of disciplinarian, knowing he's only going to be there until the end of the season? It's an awful dressing room where ego and entitlement outweighs ability and what they're actually producing on the pitch. So I make you right. The only way that Spurs stay up is if Forest and West Ham don't get enough points to go past them, because I can't see where the next Tottenham win is coming from.
You know what? They play at home. You said at Palace. The Spurs, we talked about the Arsenal fans having a big part to play for Arsenal winning the Premier League title. Spurs fans have a massive part to play in their home games because we was at the North London derby. The atmosphere was unreal, wasn't it? It was absolutely electric. They've got to make sure that atmosphere is, no matter if their team goes behind, because if they go 1-0 down against Palace at home, that stadium under Thomas Frank would have gone unbelievably toxic. They've got to make sure, the Spurs fans, that they don't, but they want to see their team putting up a fight. And I've just looked at Spurs' next 5 fixtures. Palace at home, Atletico Madrid away, Liverpool away, Atletico Madrid at home, Forest at home. They are unbelievably tough fixtures. And the thing that they have in their favour is they play Wolves, Leeds, and I mentioned about Forest. So they're going to be the 3 games.
Good luck beating Leeds.
Good luck beating Wolves.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But they're the 3 games that you look at them and you go, right, if we can take 6 points out of that, we're going to be okay. But the only thing I disagree with you, Sam, is I think West Ham, even though they got big 5-2 up at Anfield because they're probably a bit too open, West Ham are actually playing well at the minute. West Ham are...
But they're not getting enough points, though, Perry.
Yeah, but they've got different games. But they've got players in their team, like whether it's Somerville or Jarrod Bowen, are in good form. And they've got a structure and a belief in their manager. So Nottingham Forest have players that can get you out of trouble. We saw, obviously, Morgan Gibbs-White getting his worldie against Brighton. So I think you're saying that the other teams won't get enough points. I ain't too sure about that.
I didn't say that. I said that was my feeling 6 weeks ago, but now I'm starting to think, crikey, it is possible that they could end up going down. And that's because I don't think that Tottenham have realised as a group that they're actually in serious danger. Or if they have realised, I'm not sure they care, which is a real problem, because a lot of, especially the most influential characters, will think to themselves, and I'm talking about Romero and Van de Ven, they'll think to themselves, well, if we go down, I'm off. So it doesn't really bother me. I'm not suggesting for 1 second that is actually the case, but that's the vibe you get. That is the vibe you get when you watch them, when you spend time around. Listen, we've been there so many times. I've followed them in Europe. I've followed them at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium a lot this season. You see that the way they react to the manager. I mean, Mickey van der Ven looks at Thomas Frank and Igor Tudor as if they're morons half the time. And I don't know where that comes from. I don't know where the whole sort of the not listening to the manager stuff comes from, but it has certainly permeated that dressing room. That's what it feels like. And how you pull them out from this nosedive, I don't know. I think you're almost in a little bit of fingers crossed territory if you're Tottenham, because you've tried everything else. You've changed the formation. You fired the manager. There is no transfer window. You've done everything you can possibly do. You've still got the raft of injuries. I'm not sure there's much else. Just a quick word on Crystal Palace, because they're the team that they play on Thursday.
Yeah.
The big benefit that Tottenham have got, with all due respect, is Lacroix being out because he's suspended. He's a very good defender. If they play the kid Canvo, then Spurs will have a chance, because his confidence has been shot to bits, hasn't it? I mean, he's made a lot of mistakes in the Conference League and in the and even in the Premier League. Actually, made one at the weekend as well. Palace were actually okay up until that penalty, but it is the home games now where they've got to take advantage. Tottenham, they've got to try and get everybody on their side like they did for the North London derby. And this one, maybe because of Lacroix's absence, they might be able to get something from. I don't know.
I bet you the atmosphere is nowhere near as red hot as it was against Arsenal. It'll be nervous, whereas it was defiant, wasn't it, against Arsenal?
Yeah, well, I think there was hope. The new manager bounce they thought it was going to have. The thing with Igor Tudor as well is his interviews. You compare Vitor Pereira's interview to Igor Tudor's interview after the games, right? Vitor Pereira's was, I know we've got spirit, we've got fight in my camp. I know I've got the players. Even if Igor Tudor doesn't believe that he's got the fight or the spirit or the players, he's got to make the players believe. So he said one of his things where we'll see in the game, won't we? Have you got the leaders? Have you got the fight? Have you got the spirit? And he went, his answer should be unreservedly, I've seen these players. I believe in them. Even if he doesn't believe it, he's got to make the players believe it, that he respects them and he rates them. And the vibe is that we're all getting is he doesn't. He doesn't. And
they don't believe in him, and he doesn't believe in them.
No,
it's a recipe for success.
They need Share to go in there.
It's an interim manager. It doesn't work. And I know you'll point to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Michael Carrick. They're club legends, right? So they've got the buy-in from the fans. They've got the buy-in from the players. And both of them brought the feel-good factor back. You bring in someone from overseas who's never managed in the Premier League before, it's not going to have the same impact. And particularly if you've got a dressing room where they aren't the best in terms of attitude. I don't get the appointment. I don't understand the recruitment process. How do they stumble upon this guy?
It's a good question. And I think the issue I have with it is that when I sat down straight after that game against Newcastle and thought they're going to have to make a change here, we started to come up with ideas of who they could change Thomas Frank for. And there's not a great roster. There isn't. That is a problem. You don't sit there. There's not a candidate that immediately leaps off the page. But how can you tell me that Igor Tudor is a better appointment than Robbie Keane?
Agreed.
For the simple reason that Robbie Keane understands Tottenham Hotspur, has infectious energy, and has a very good track record recently of being a successful manager. I know you're going to say to me, oh, yeah, that was in Israel. That was in Hungary. You still have to win. At the end of the day, you still got to win. And he is winning. And Hungary is not the easiest place to win football matches in. The atmosphere is absolutely electric. So this is a guy who's done pretty well. Why have you decided to go for someone who's completely alien to your football club, who's got no experience of British football, rather than someone who's played for your club, understands British football, has coached in the league before, has been a part of the league before, and has been around English football before, and you've decided not to go down that route? It was absolutely perplexing to me, bearing in mind we all know, because we've spoke to people around him, that he would have absolutely jumped at the chance to be the Tottenham Hotspur manager. It seems very, very strange. Leeds 0, Manchester City 1. Excellent dogged performance in adversity from Manchester City. If they win the title, Perry, it will be because of their January transfer window recruitment. Mark Gay and Ruben Diaz, excellent at the back. Semenyo. Those three players actually have restored their aura, I think.
I think what it is, you said there, and we did a bit yesterday, didn't we, about defending being an art, and that's what they've got. Mark Gahey has brought that bit of resilience. His partnership with Diaz looks really good, and Anton Semenyo, with the value of players now 60 million, that seems like a bargain because he's come in, he's got his 6 goals. Erling Haaland wasn't playing, and you look at that, you think, right, how Man City going to cope? And Semenyo steps up where he's in the Erling Haaland position where Aït-Nouri just rafts across the box. But what you have to do is it's a strange thing. Man City will be seen as sort of tough in that game out. Whereas you look at the game, Leeds were actually excellent.
Brilliant.
In the first 20, 25 minutes.
Really good.
They pressed. Calvert-Lewin missed a sitter, where the ball was whipped across the box and he missed his target completely. He missed a 1-on-1 in the second half. And in the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes, they went and pressed Man City. But Man City dug that out. That was a very un-Pep Guardiola performance, wasn't it? Where normally they control games, they have a lot of possession, but they've found a way to win ugly. And when you win in titles, you have to win ugly.
City look to be enjoying it, which up until recently has been a stark contrast to Arsenal, who have panicked a little bit. Will it give them the edge, Crook, in the title race, do you think?
I think that win for Arsenal was huge at the weekend because if they drop points, then suddenly Wednesday becomes really difficult because I think City will beat Forest at home, and I think Brighton is a tough place to go. They've turned a corner in terms of back-to-back wins. They were playing okay in defeat anyway, and Arsenal's record against Brighton is hit and miss. So it felt like a massive weekend. But because I'm saying it felt like a massive weekend, I can see myself in the future saying that again, because I do think this is a genuine title race where Arsenal can't afford any slips, because at the moment Manchester City seem to be in this groove. They're not putting teams away like they have done in their previous title winning campaigns, but because of those signings they've made that you've said, Gay has shored them up defensively, Semenyo's given them something at the other end. They're doing enough to win. I don't think they're going to drop many points, City, between now and the rest of the season. So Arsenal have got to be right at it, to the end.
What does the Arsenal PR department think about that, Perry?
100% it's a title race. I never thought that it wasn't, because when you've got a manager like Guardiola who's been through it, the advantage that they have is they've got 5 or 6 players that have won the Premier League before. So, those players won't be feeling the pressure. Those players can relax and enjoy, as you said there, enjoy the games, even if they're, struggling in possession, they can actually enjoy the situation. That's because this is a Man City team that is in transition, and Pep Guardiola said that himself. So the thing that gives me hope is even in those games you mentioned, Leeds, even against Newcastle, where Newcastle were the better side, they still give you chances. They still give you good chances, which the Man City teams before didn't. And what's happening against Newcastle and Leeds, those two haven't taken those brilliant chances to put Man City under a little bit of pressure. So I still think they're get-atable, but this is going to go right down to the last 2 games, game of the season, without any shadow of a doubt.
Do you know what? If Arsenal win the title, our final podcast of the season, or the podcast that comes immediately after they clinch it, we're going to have to invite Perry and Martin Keown on at the same time. We've got to do that. That's got to be our punishment.
But don't make any jokes between now and then against Arsenal, because you're going to get blacklisted by Keown, aren't you? We can't have any fun. All right, no football banter. It's very serious stuff. This guy.
By the way, you're on his little black book anyway. He's going to come for you no matter what. So don't matter. Goldstein first, then Matterface, then Crook. Have some of that.
No. Me and Martin actually are very good friends. We get on very, very well. We love a little bit of banter between the two of us. It's a little bit hammed up when we're on the air, actually, to be honest with you. But he's one, he is a great bloke. But 2, he is also a little bit deluded, isn't he? He does sometimes come up with a complete nonsense.
None taken.
At the bottom of the table, should we quickly just have a look at the 2 fixtures that are really important this week? West Ham, Fulham. West Ham embarrassing defensively from set pieces. I mean, if you are Fulham this weekend, and I know we didn't talk about Raul Jimenez's little push, but we refused to talk about VAR and refereeing decisions after what happened elsewhere. So we're just not doing that. All right, but okay, there's a bit of controversy there. Yes, we understand it. What sort of game are we getting when these 2 meet, Crook?
I think a really good game, because I think both teams need to win for different reasons. Fulham very much part of the European conversation. 8 wins in their last 14 at home. So it's obviously going to be a difficult place for West Ham to go. But I agree with Perry. If you look at the scoreline, you think, well, West Ham were well beaten there. They had a better XG. They had more possession than Liverpool. It was only really the defensive mistakes that cost them. So
Did you watch
I
it?
don't.
Did
Yeah,
you
I
watch
did.
it?
I saw the
Right. Okay.
defending.
So let me tell you about the XG. Right. Let's just, before we start going on about West Ham had a better XG. Right, just remember that Liverpool gave them 3 one-on-one chances by passing the ball to them inside their own penalty area, which of course inflates the XG. Liverpool were just as bad defensively as West Ham. I don't expect Fulham to do that. So
No.
there is a little bit that XG headline comment actually has to be factored in by the
But
fact
not
that
many
Liverpool
teams go to Anfield
did their
and have more of the
best
ball,
and passed
which
the
they
ball.
did.
No, that's
Yeah.
true. That's true. Absolutely true.
I think that Nuno, we all know that normally likes to play counter-attacking football. I think he's just had a little change in his philosophy. I think he's thought, right, going up to Anfield when West Ham had a shocking, what was it? It's 1 win in the last 53 Premier League away games. They surprised me that they went for it and they made it open because Liverpool have better players than you. But I think he's changed his philosophy a bit and he's thought, right, our strength is in with Bowen on the right-hand side, somebody on the left, Castellanos up front. So I think he's thought, right, we're going to go and actually try and win games rather than try and stay in them and nick one on the counter-attack. So I think you've got a different sort of philosophy now from Nuno.
And Castellanos does give him a little bit more fight and a focal point, doesn't he? Because he holds the ball up, although he did switch off for the defending for one of the goals with the Ekitike goal, which was just annoying. But yeah, you're right. Listen, they were in that game. It was all set pieces. All the goals seemed to come from set pieces at both ends on Saturday. But it'd be interesting. They are playing with more fight. They just need points. They need points, and they've got a tough run. They've got Fulham. I think they've got Manchester City coming up as well, haven't they? Over the next couple of weeks, West Ham, which is going to be difficult for them, although it is at home, Leeds face Sunderland. Much better, Sunderland, against Bournemouth, by the way. Really good game. They could have won that match. Should have had a penalty. It's another one of those decisions we're not talking about. A win will take Leeds, though, to 34 points, and that is a tantalising target to reach, isn't it, Crook?
Yeah, and I think if they play as well as they did against Man City, there's every chance they get that because Sunderland's record away from home is still nowhere near as strong as when they're playing at the Stadium of Light. And that they didn't lose much in defeat, Leeds, against Manchester City. You know, very unlucky with a couple of chances they had. And we've said this, Scott said it on the podcast last week, the difference between Leeds and Spurs in particular is that everybody's on the same page. They're all fighting for one common cause. I've got no concern that Leeds are going to go down.
Perry?
No, me neither. I think that the two key players in that fixture is Ampadu playing centre midfield for Leeds. So I think he gives them that sort of stability. Granit Xhaka obviously coming back for Sunderland. Again, we mentioned about Chelsea's young players. They have miles more control when Granit Xhaka's in there. So it'd just be whether that he can play after come back from injury, or whether he can play 2 games in 3-4 days, whether he plays or not. Because I think if he doesn't play, then I'd fancy Leeds strongly. But if he does, then I'd go for a draw in that one. Because, again, he's changed his philosophy, Daniel Farke, isn't he? He'd give it a go against Man City. Yeah, that was the game before that he changed his philosophy where he thought, right, no, I'm going to play 2 up top. I'm going to actually go for it. And they've turned their season around.
Good stuff, Perry. Thank you very much. It was good to have you on the podcast today. And we, of course, will preview all the weekend's action and look back on the midweek fixtures on Thursday when we get back together with Scortimento. Alex, thank you very much. Have a good week. I look forward to seeing you on Friday morning as well on talkSPORT. Remember, if you want to follow all the action, the best thing to do is to listen to Adrian on Tuesday and Wednesday night as he whips you around the grounds in the Premier League. We're back on Thursday afternoon, Friday morning. Join us for that. This is talkSPORT and it's Premier League All Access.